So in the previous presentations, we talked a lot about the challenges and how people are addressing them today. In the last presentation, it was about getting your message out, getting your story out, getting people to engage with you. Okay, you got them. How do you convert the gift? And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk specifically about what we can draw from the domain of e-commerce and their experience and best practices and trials and errors over now what are 20 years of e-commerce, and what's relevant to nonprofits in closing that transaction online. Not all relevant. So one thing about e-commerce, I mean, one of the biggest pieces of e-commerce and digital advertising that escapes a lot of the attention about it is the amount of metrics that are being generated and used to improve processes. You know, one of the things that, the most important thing about Google, the greatest impact it's had on the marketing and advertising world is that when Google emerged with their AdWords products, advertisers were able to know what their dollar was actually being spent on, as opposed to the old days, or part of what we're still doing today in print media. You spend money, it goes out to an audience, you don't know if it's reached the audience, been read, had any impact at all, okay? Google, think about Google as like the package codes you put on your mailings. When you get that slip back, you got a package code on it, you've got the gift, you can associate that back to what was sent. You're doing things, and have been doing things similar for years, that have been only recently available in the e-commerce space, but they've made a huge impact. Okay, this is an illustration. The metrics are actually a lot worse in terms of e-commerce and closing the deal on a shopping cart. So websites will track how many people come to the site, how many people initiate a transaction, how many people put stuff in their cart, how many people actually complete and go to checkout. And that gap between how many people will put something in their cart and how many people will actually complete that transaction. How many, let's have some guesses from the audience. How many would think that is 50-50? The 50% of the people who put an item in their shopping cart will convert. Higher or lower? Who says lower than the 50%? Okay. Who says lower than 40%? Lower than 33? That's about what it is. So 33% of people that put an item in their shopping cart online will actually complete the transaction. So imagine going to the grocery store and seeing everybody queued up with their shopping cart in line to check out, and two-thirds of them walk out. So while e-commerce is huge, it's over $1 trillion today, and people have been very successful at it, and it's got a great reputation, and it's growing 15-20% year over year, there's still huge problems in that area that people are working on, trying to address and improve, and we're going to learn from them, from what they're doing. Well, I had to have an eye chart up here, so I'll read some of this to you. This is a recent survey of reasons why people abandoned a transaction that they started in e-commerce. And some of the higher points are, one, presented with unexpected costs. This is mostly shipping. You get to the end of the transaction and you see, oh, I've got to pay $15 for shipping. Well, I'm backing off of that. Second, I was just browsing. Odd to put the item in your cart and just browsing, but everyone needs an answer. Found a better price elsewhere, right? I've got 2, 3, 4 windows open. I've got the cart, I've got the item in all of them. I'll check out the one that has the best price. Overall price too expensive. I think that's in line with presented with unexpected costs. Decided against buying, same as I was just browsing. But then we get into some more technical and addressable factors. So website navigation too complicated. A quarter of people cited that as a factor in abandoning a transaction. Website crashed. That's an odd one. Process was taking too long. We'll talk about that specifically. Excessive payment security checks. People want to have a secure transaction, but they don't want to be troubled to participate in a secure transaction. We'll talk about that a little bit too. At the same time, concerns about payment security. Okay, and then some other ones, delivery options were unsuitable, website timeout, price presented in a foreign currency, that's an oddball. But my payment was declined. That does not surprise me at all. So we'll talk about a few of those later. So other causes that are a little easier to read. Forced to register and create an account. Who would like to create another account online? Does everyone have enough email addresses, passwords to keep track of, cookies on their computer, things to worry about? Lack of contact details. There's a great story, it goes back a few years now, but for years, there was no published Amazon customer support phone number. And you can look it up, there was a great article in Slate, it does go years back, about a guy who tracked down the Amazon customer support phone number. And at the time got a live person in the US on the phone. Today, of course, the biggest companies use what are called IVR and other automated phone technology or route you elsewhere. But people want the opportunity, especially in a time of need, and you've got them when they want to make a transaction. They want to contact somebody now. The internet is all about immediacy. But people have their needs to talk to someone. Funny story, I was in New Orleans for the weekend. I was stranded there yesterday. My flight had been canceled. I'm on United. Boo United. And I've got to rebook my flight, so I click online, and it takes me 5 clicks to find the 1-800 number. It's 1-800-UNITED-1 if you ever need it. Got on the phone, and I'm presented with their phone tree that says, if you give us a few bits of information, we'll help you with getting you to the right person, which of course is nonsense. I just hit operator, operator, operator until I got someone online. And this was after going through their website that said, well, if you type in some information, our automated people will get back to you. Just want to rebook a flight. Just rebook a flight. So this says a lot about me, and being of a certain age, I suppose. I preferred to wait for 25 minutes on a cell phone, on a corner in New Orleans, where reception is horrible, by the way, to talk to somebody to rebook my flight. Right? So contact options, the ability just to find somebody when you want them is important, and if you can't find that, it's a disincentive to completing the transaction. Lack of payment options. Okay, used to be PayPal was king. Now people want to do their own credit card. Some people want PayPal. Google Wallet is a minus, small percent of the population. How many are taking donations in Bitcoin today? Right? Someday you might have to offer that. Lack of product information. We'll talk about this because it sounds very commercial and specific, but I think there are lessons to learn here in our space. And then confusion between offline and online pricing. Consistency this reflects the need for consistency in your messaging. Someone had a question about branding and sub-branding. Anne-Marie pointed out the web page they put up for the big wheel had the same Cleveland Hearing and Speech branding, even though it was a separate event. That need for consistency between offline and online is important because it can be a driver away from a transaction. Okay, so what are the best and the brightest in the e-commerce space doing and have done to address these concerns? And what are you seeing today in the retooling of shopping cart sites up there? Okay, number one, reducing the number of pages to checkout. In my past life, which was in the e-commerce space, we used to say clicks are precious. Your click is precious. We want you to use as few of those, or need to use as few of those, to complete a transaction. Wide variety of payment options. Ask the user, if you need someone to register, or you want to present the opportunity of creating a quicker checkout the next time they go through, ask after, not before. Right? Get out of the way. High quality interactive product images. There is a need for people to see and touch, get as close to an item that they're buying or a transaction that they're making. Highly relevant items and specials. People like to be offered other goodies that are connected to the things that they are buying. And display policies clearly. So don't tell me about shipping fees at the end of the transaction when I'm checking out. Tell me what your return policy is. Tell me if any other fees apply. What's going to appear on my credit card, all of that stuff. So let's look at an example, and I'll guide you through this. This is the Home Depot, and this reflects a lot of those things that are happening in the e-commerce space today. And I'm going to go back here a little bit so I can see it just as badly as you all can. All right. This is terrible contrast, isn't it? All right, so I'll walk you through it, some of these things here. There we go. Okay, estimated shipping time, right up front. So information, when am I going to get this? What's in it for me? How immediate is this purchase going to affect me? Product images, right, that you can drill into and see in more detail. You've got the option to save things for later. Yeah, I'm interested in this. We'll talk about how e-commerce people are recovering transactions using information like this. Trust symbol, okay, it's a secure transaction. And all of this, note, is embedded in the form itself. This isn't stuff you have to click on. This isn't stuff you had to click through first to get to. This isn't stuff you're told after the fact. The designers here have laid it all out, so all those concerns that people have embedded or are surrounded in the transaction. In the case of promotions, what did I save? That's a dollar item down here. Contact info. Not in a bad spot. Putting things in the corners, good place to get attention, right? And the Home Depot has plenty of people to talk to, being a physical retailer. A little bit more, okay? Our payment options, they do PayPal, they do credit card checkouts, they take just about every credit card known to man. And our relevant suggestions, again, with those same points. What's it cost? Do people like it or not? Is it relevant or not? A little bit of social feedback there. And you can click on these to get brighter, sharper views of what's being shown here as well. And then finally, those policies, right? Pickup, return, pricing, pricing in store versus pricing online, yada, 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 okay? All of those lessons put into the form itself. So you're there, you're on that form, you're captured, you don't have to go anywhere else to answer some of the questions and concerns that people have expressed over time in making those e-commerce transactions. Okay, what else is happening? Some less visible stuff. So print to web promotions. So someone mentioned earlier, how do you get people to go from offline to online? A URL and a coupon, right? It's sort of the equivalent of your package code before. A few years back, you saw a lot of personalized URLs. So you'd get a coupon that actually had your name somewhere on what you typed into the browser. That's less prominent now. Reminding them of abandoned carts. What you're seeing a lot of today is called remarketing. So have you ever been on a website and the advertising banner on there is from a place you've just been, right? Or been to recently or been to often. E-commerce sites are using information about where you've been and paying more for the advertising space to get you back, right? It's a little creepy, and once you start to notice it, it's really creepy. And we'll see if it works. It'll probably be abandoned in a few years when people get tired of it, or some security event happens. Recovery programs. Okay, you abandoned a transaction. Hey, come on back. We'll give you $5 off. Welcoming new customers. I don't have the statistic on me, but a high majority of e-commerce transactions are one-time transaction. That buyer will never be back to that store again. And so they want to thank them for their transaction in a way that they'll do everything they can to get them back, or incite them to pass their news on to others. When they do have returning customers, to recognize them, reward them, cater to them, make them feel good about a relationship that they have with the e-commerce site. Okay, what would a presentation about the internet be without cats? How does this translate into the nonprofit space? Let's talk about that. So first, it's a big space for nonprofits today, right? Roughly $25 billion of $300 billion total in the US is raised online. That's mostly in response to single disastrous events, Katrina, other hurricanes, disasters, the New Jersey last year. 8 to 10% of that, so that's 8 to 10% of the total. It has been growing steadily, again, since the recession in 2008, so double-digit growth in online. And it's not particularly cannibalizing the offline stream as well. There's evidence of that, and I'll show you some figures about it. And of course, for many donors, particularly younger, that online transaction is the preferred way to buy something. It's the preferred way to be communicated for many people. All right, Luke talked a little bit about branding and Anne-Marie during their presentation. That's the first step. You noticed there are studies that show in going from an organization's page to make a transaction, to donate or register or subscribe, to a page that is branded differently will result in some abandonment. And that's the technical term in the commercial space for losing that transaction. That abandoned cart is called generally abandonment. So you go from, a little less so from an organization to PayPal today, but that was certainly more prominent in the past. People will just abandon that transaction because it raises questions. Is this secure? Is this really going to the organization? How much is going to the organization? And so just that switch from your nice branded page to just taking a transaction will result in some people just giving up the transaction. Next is, so we've got some anecdotal evidence of that. 5x or more, that's from Network for Good. That's just on the branded page. Network for Good has a variety of products, one of which is you get your logo on top so at least it still looks like you. And they've done some research that proves that they will get higher donations, higher levels of donations, if you maintain your brand across that transition. And then there's some anecdotal evidence out there as well. There are plenty of people who have tried going from PayPal to embedding something in their site that have seen greater results in terms of conversion. Okay, talked earlier about this. Good modern design is an expectation today. Modern, up-to-date content, a look and feel that reflects today's standards for the internet, reflect that your organization is still around, frankly. Older websites, old content can convey the impression that the organization is not active. And sadly, the bar is set in terms of the frequency and currency of content by the commercial space, and we need to catch up with that. Okay, some of the points that were on that survey that are a little easier. So contact info. Have your contact info prominent on, we're talking about the transaction page now. Clear policies. If you're charging fees, so for example, if it's an event registration and there's an additional fee per ticket, to count that. If you want to communicate how much of that dollar goes to the organization's mission, that's an important place to put that. Embedding everything in that transaction itself, answering people's potential questions while they're still pulling out their credit card. If you want people to register for an email, if you want them to register for a premium members-only content site, ask after, not before, as we saw earlier. Okay, actually, I think I'm working with an older version of this presentation because there are some points here I know that are missing. Clicks are precious, I mentioned before. Any transitions, even if it's within your own pages, can lead to abandonment. We see a lot of organizations that will have a nice Donate Now link on their site that'll take you to a page that starts to explain about your gift and how to give. No, they've already opted in. Take them to the page. That's one step you can take out of the process. Also making those buttons prominent on your site. I mentioned transitions off-site being a cause for concern with some donors.
Hey, Ron.
Yes, Ben.
Any numbers on people's expectations of a mobile-friendly page?
Do we have expectations from people on a mobile-friendly page? I'd say we're getting there. So I talked a little bit about modern design. There are some, standards is not quite the right word, but there are some platforms that are emerging in design that are sort of taking over the world. And the most prominent of those is called Bootstrap. It's actually the foundation of Twitter. And the platform, there's a mobile portion of that technology. And you'll start to notice, and you may have noticed over time, pages that sort of look vaguely the same structure in terms of columns. The boxes are the same shape, rounded corners, the fonts seem to be the same size. That's people in the implementation world taking advantage of design best practices that have already been determined and made. So you can take design technology off the shelf, and Luke, cover your ears. You can take design technology off the shelf and use it to gain the advantages of, okay, we know how to do mobile already, we know how to do tablet already, all in one set of content. So standards, best practices exist that you guys can take off the shelf and wind up with something that looks to your donor like what they've come to see in buying a pair of shoes or bidding on an item. Okay, let's spend some time on product information because it is important, we've seen from the e-commerce space, but it doesn't really seem relevant to the nonprofit space. Except if you turn that around into not so much what's in it for me, what's this product going to do for me, because that's why people want product information, but what's this gift going to do? What impact am I going to have? And there are serious numbers that show that this is a very important factor in converting a gift. So we've got some stats here from a couple of surveys over the last couple of years. And by the way, a lot of this is going to sound second nature because you're doing it face-to-face, hand-to-hand today. Right? The way you get a significant gift is, hey Ben, thanks for your gift last year. We used it to build a new row of seats in the auditorium. We can show them to you. What can we count on from you this year? Okay? Communicating the impact of the gift is how we raise money today, and it can be used, it can be done online, and there's studies that show that it can have an impact. Okay, so first, The charity explained the specific message to me. Luke talked about storytelling. Anne-Marie talked about getting your message out. It gave me information about what my gift accomplished. So 72% of second-time givers gave in part because they were told what specifically their first gift did. And lastly, it made me feel that my gift made a difference. So communicating getting emotional response as well as sort of an intellectual response. Couple quotes. This is a great one. There's still a problem in the museum field. People still feel we hang stuff on walls. People have to see we're making a difference in the community. So that's the president of the American Alliance of Museums. So an organization struggling to get its message out, hey, we are relevant, right? This is what we do. We do more than hang old pictures on walls from our warehouse. Millennials are much more focused on wanting to support the things that matter to them. I'll give you a case study. I'm on the board of Case Alumni Association, and one of the things we do is we go to various locations where there are alumni and meet and greet, maintain relationships, and make the ask. And what we've heard loud and clear from the younger donors is, I don't want to give to the annual fund. I don't know what it does. I don't want to give to scholarships. I don't want to give to activity groups. I want to give for stuff that engineers use. Right? I'll give money to put things in people's hands. So we learned a very specific need from a very specific segment of our base, and we're trying to address that. And it seems very connected to millennials. So there's been a lot of growth in crowdfunding over the last 5 years. It's been very prominent, but it's a very small percentage of all giving, by the way, especially in the nonprofit space. And the average successful project is only about $25,000. Everyone hears about the watch guys got $2 million in pledges, but most are unsuccessful and most are successful for very small amounts. But it does prove out that people will give when they see the impact of their gift. They'll give to specific things or to help specific people, and that plays into the storytelling that Luke talked about before. All right, so in the e-commerce space, how do you connect? How do you figure out what a person wants and then get that to the right person? In the commercial space, there's a domain called product management or product marketing management. And these people's job is to understand their customer base so well that they design and package products that sell themselves. And I like to think about this as what we should be doing in the development space, to get our message out there and to present our services so clearly with such great impact that the ask makes itself. And so what do these people think about? Okay? They think about their audience a lot. You've got focus groups, you've got customer response. You saw some of the data that we saw earlier. Those would be going to product marketing managers in the e-commerce space. But what variables do they have in their hands? Okay, naming of the product. We've all heard about great, terrible sounding product names, right? But that's key. Describing it. And describing it in terms of the impact it has. People want, in general, 3 things. They want, well, in the business space, 3 things when you're trying to sell a product. Does it make me more money? Does it save me money? Does it make me feel good? Okay, so in the nonprofit space, does it have an impact? Does it make me feel good? And how do you communicate that through the product description itself? Features, what are we actually doing here? Wrapper, targeting to the audience, and then pricing. Is it affordable? Does this fit my feeling of how much value I'll get out of it? And you can use some of those lessons in our asks. So we're back to the eye chart here, and I apologize. But this is a list of different specific asks for program support for an organization. And some organizations know very well what a dollar does. We work with the food bank, and we were doing a demo for them one day, and I made a test transaction through our system, and I said, that's just $1. And someone right away piped up, no, that's 4 meals. Right? They can tell you exactly what every dollar does and the impact that it has. And some organizations can do this very well. Some are challenged to. And frankly, we've worked with some to try and turn their messaging into a thought process where, yeah, we can assign some value to what a dollar does, or say what it costs us to complete our mission in terms of dollars, and then to present that in front of people. And I'll show you another example. But you can create shopping cart-like experiences among the offerings that you have. Okay, upgrading and renewal. So if you are, this is most commonly associated with events. You're doing event registration, always have give an additional donation option on the form. And long after the event is closed. We've seen organizations run events months after the event. Someone will make a donation to that original event form. Because much like people will leave that envelope on their mailing table and only pick it up December 29th, people will leave something in their inbox and respond to it later. We think about email as immediate, and we think about the web as immediate. But people will treat it the same way they treat other forms of communication. And if it costs you nothing to leave a form up there after an event is closed, you can still reap some benefits from it. Automate renewal. We work with a lot of organizations using recurring giving. So there are many platforms out there today. Are many people familiar with merchant accounts, payment gateways? Basically, it's how you take credit cards and how you take credit cards online. And there are software products in front of the charge card, sort of the software equivalent of those little swipes you use, that have features built into them to automate recurring giving. So that when someone is giving a gift, you can set up, okay, this is going to run every month. Thank you very much. And it meets many donors' desires to give consistently and, don't solicit me anymore. You got me. You got me. Just take my card. We see this most relevant in human services organizations. So the food bank is very successful at this. Also in alumni organizations where you own your base and you're marketing to them. Yes?
May I go back to email for just a minute?
Sure.
I have noticed that for my organization, we have a number of emails that are on the Gmail platform. And recently with Gmail's new algorithms that put into place.
Yeah, they're new filtering you out of the way. Yeah.
Exactly. Is there any keyword utilization, anything like that can help us somewhat get around being shuttled to the promotions folder?
I'm not the person to ask that. If Anne Marie is still around, she would be. Have some more insight on that. No. She made a point in her presentation, though, that may hint at something here. You noticed she talked about the bracketing ask in there. I think that's a good way of at least filtering yourself or making yourself a little more meaningful, catching someone's eye in that subject line, which is what most people read anyway. I'm not sure if there's a way out of the promotions folder trap yet.
There is.
Oh, there is. Thank you.
Yeah.
Here we go. Share.
Go to the email and say, I want this to go into my email.
That's right. So a donor, a recipient can move it from the promotions trap into your normal inbox. Absolutely.
Where she's talking about getting the inbox.
So we talked about making an ask before. And by the way, someone, I wanted to bring this up on the subject of collecting email addresses. If you've got someone on the phone, perfect time to ask them for the email address, right? So add that to the message of your email. If you would rather see this in your inbox, please click here. Automate renewal. And another thing, you can use automation as sort of a feature of your different asks. So how many organizations here do tributes? So in honor of, in memory of. Wonderful time to ask, would you like to make this an annual gift on the anniversary, birth event, as appropriate. Okay, promotions in membership organizations. And I'll even say beyond that, even for events. How many people do different pricing levels, early bird, normal registration for events, right? That's a form of promotion. And if you have, say, last minute, late registration, the ability to offer some sort of, okay, come on in and bring in a friend for a discount. Okay, you can be creative in these situations. What are the benefits of this? Okay, so we talked about being specific in the ask. First is, you're connecting the donor to the impact that gift has. You're making that appeal both rational and emotional. We've all seen the commercials for Save the Children where they say $1 does this, right? My favorite model is the Heifer Project. This is a group that sends livestock to developing communities, always 2. And when you get the annual fund, when you get their appeal, it's not the annual fund letter. It's a catalog. Very beautiful, glossy catalog, cow on the cover, right? Flip how many cows you want to give, flip how many goats, flip how many ducks, right? Again, always 2. So you're connecting the donor, they're connecting the donor really directly into what their dollar does. in a very physical, visible, tangible way. So I'm not giving them money, I'm sending a goat somewhere, 2 goats somewhere. It communicates that you're a good steward of their investment, right? As long as that dollar figure is close to the impact that it has, and it's a good impact, right? It also shows that you are focused on your mission. This isn't an ordinary ask. This is the donors being asked to participate in this mission that we are very focused on. It's the only thing we do, or it's a very focused segment of what we do. I'll get to that in a minute. Make this timely. How many of you have appeals? How many of your mission changes throughout the year, seasonally? Do you have different asks in summer and winter? Okay, if an organization were to, if you've got a very different ask in the summer, very different ask in the winter, be specific about that, what that is, what that need is. And again, you keep those forms up, right? We know the food bank, I'll go back to their example, they've still got Thanksgiving forms online from their campaign during Thanksgiving time, because somebody may still have that email in their inbox. And it'll connect them back to that time when feeding someone is important and top of mind. And it educates the donor on your mission greater at the same time as you're making that ask, even if they abandon that transaction, right? They've learned all those things about you. Inspirational images. All right, this is where I'm going to regret. Okay, Luke said earlier we've all got cameras on us. They're not always high quality. So I was really privileged to attend an event last fall for an organization called Minds Matter. And what they do is they break this barrier of poverty keeping many kids from going to college. They've got a mentoring program. They've got a 100% success rate with the kids that they take, starting as sophomores in high school, for 3 years of tutoring and training and mentoring. 100% of them to date have landed in college. Tremendous program. And at their banquet, their first banquet this year, which they had at Crawford, great location since they renovated, by the way, they had out tables of what they do from a price perspective. So what you're almost seeing here is little things like, nutritional support. They feed the kids during tutoring sessions. It may be the only good meal they get a day, right? So you've got good, healthy food, a stack of it there, and nutrition support for a child in the program. A little placard there says that's $150. That's what your gift accomplishes. Right here, now see, I can't even see this myself. Age, bus passes. These are all kids in the community that are all taking RTA downtown to get to these tutoring sessions. $50 is an RTA pass for a student for a year, right? Little gift, big impact, because it gets them into that program. Then, a year of ACT prep. I don't have kids in college, I had no idea, right? This is an expensive proposition. Computers and the like. So again, you're connecting the donor to what your organization does, what it costs to accomplish your organization's mission, and in the best of all circumstances, what their dollar really does accomplish. It's very, very, very powerful way to raise money. Okay, relevant suggestions. This seems really out of place in the nonprofit space. How do we do Amazon recommendations for nonprofits? Well, what do you know about people online? You can figure some things out. You might know where they came from, right? So I think Anne-Marie talked about, some organization here talked about, they embed in their social media their homepage link. They put a link in a story from Facebook, or they put a link in an email. Somebody hits that link, you know where they came from. So let's take them to a targeted message, or at least one that continues the conversation and reflects the fact that they read this far, even when making an ask, right? So you're not creating a relationship here, but you're creating a respect for people's time and attention and knowledge of what they did. And that does communicate some respect and some relationship. Okay, if you're doing segmentation, what have they given in the past? Frequency, currency, recency. Take them to messages online that reflect what you know about them from the email that you sent them or other communication. Paper emails or paper mail this is a problem with our vocabulary today, right? Anybody know what a record is anymore? So a paper mail, take them to a page that continues that conversation with consistent branding, consistent messaging, And again, don't throw that page away, even if it's 6 weeks after the typical 6 weeks after the mail's life cycle, right? We'll leave it at there. Context, that's a good point. Okay, so how many of you are organizations that have, say, multiple missions? You do multiple things. Very good, right? So we talked about one organization about a year ago that does Meals on Wheels, Senior Center, and Child Development Services, right? And today, they don't work with us. They don't take their potential donors to one generic landing page. If they read the link talking about Meals for Wheels, they take them to a specific page saying, okay, $50 pays for 2 weeks worth of Meals on Wheels, $100 pays for a month. Hey, would you like to give $100 monthly so that you're giving Meals for Wheels away all year? Nothing about the senior programs, nothing about the child development. If they click from another point in the website where they're reading a story or being educated about that part of the mission, different page, specific asks to what the donor was just talking about. Again, you're respecting that you have a conversation going with the donor, that you are respecting that they've informed themselves. Again, not really a relationship, but it's similar to the things you would do today, face-to-face, one-to-one, to make that ask. Security. Anybody seen this before? Yeah, one nod? Okay. This is a graph of security breaches by impact over just the last 3 years. It goes on a lot further than this, by the way. And we don't have 2014 on there, but I'll indicate. So these are all the security breaches from, the reported security breaches from various sites, and they are colored by their impact. So if you see orange, that means someone got credit card information and enough personal information to actually use it. Target's not up there, but Target would be bigger than this, smaller than that. Right? So Target, that everyone heard about last year, is actually considered sort of a small to medium-sized problem. There are a lot of security issues out there. And people are rightfully concerned. Now, most of these are very big companies that take security very seriously, and breaches still happen. Okay, so what can you do? And everybody who was on the receiving end of that had a very bad day dealing with the impact of it. Okay, many people, you've probably all heard of certificates, the thing that puts a little lock on someone's browser. Recent changes in browser technology will break that lock and make it look like an insecure transaction if any of the content on your site is not secure. So if you're working with a page with a vendor that they put a certificate on it so it looks secure, but images are coming from your site, or JavaScript is coming from your site, other content is coming from your site that is not also similarly secured, people will see that there's a problem and potentially abandon a transaction. That's a recent happening. Keep an eye out for that. PCI DSS certification. There are a number of standards out there to secure the credit card transaction online, and they are layered and they are serious. And any organization that has a breach these days, like I said, is having a very bad day because they've got to go be audited from top to bottom, from their website down to their physical plants and who has keys to the doors. But you should only be working with organizations that claim that they are PCI DSS certified. It's a very good standard. I mean, it covers everything from who gets in the door, where the computer's kept, are they behind lock and key, who's got passwords, who writes code about security, who reviews the code about security, where's the code kept. It's a very, very well-written set of standards, and it does ensure a great deal of security and trust in this e-commerce space. Those breaches are large and scary, but frankly, they could be much worse. And we've got good technology out there these days, and good standards, and good education in how people should apply those standards, that most organizations can create a secure transaction with very little worry at all. And there are services out there that you can pay for that will scan and test your transaction pages to make sure that they adhere to those standards and are secure and can't be hacked. And if you subscribe to those, you got the ability to put a little seal. We saw a little seal from VeriSign on that Home Depot page. You can put those on your own web pages, your own transaction pages, that communicate that you're serious about security, you're taking your donors' concerns seriously, and they've got some additional trust when making their transaction. Relevant receipts. There's a standard in the development space to make that receipt, make that thank you worth keeping. You know, how many people would love to have your thank you notes framed on someone's wall? You can do that with your receipts. You can do that with your digital communication. It should be easy. This is more, at this point, we've talked a lot about this being a transaction, but from the donor's point of view and from your point of view, it's more than a transaction, right? It's a gift that has impact, and use that final piece of the transaction to communicate that to them. Recognizing returning donors. If it's a recurring gift, if you do have registration in place and someone signed in before making their transaction, send a different message. If it's a major gift, can you get someone involved from the organization to pick up the phone and thank them? Right? All this matters. And integration with your traditional campaigns. We talked a little bit about the importance of being consistent from paper to email. And you know, the relationship between how people want to be communicated with and how they want to transact is not one-to-one, right? The way people want to be communicated with roughly breaks down into, you know, the 4 generations. Greatest generation want a physical letter, physical mail. Boomers want a phone call or prefer a phone call. Gen X prefers an email. Millennials prefer a text. We'll see how long that one holds out. But more and more of them up that demographic curve will transact online and prefer to transact online. Right? Millennials specifically, Gen X, yes. Boomers more and more, and even greatest generation are more and more comfortable making transactions online. And a lot of that is because e-commerce, those benefits of e-commerce, right? They're used to good, successful, easy transactions when buying something. And we can benefit from those successes, that impression in the market that, yes, putting a credit card online is okay now, and frankly, more secure than writing it down on a slip of paper and sending it somewhere. Creating specific forms for mailers. So how many do package codes when they do mailings? Right? Enough? Okay. So you can do the same thing with, that's a way to track. Here you go, you've paperized Google AdWords, right? You can track what actually resulted in a donation. So you can treat that, and there are 2 ways that you can do that. One is, you can ask them to put in the promotion code. You can ask them to put in, the package code when they're filling in a transaction, right? Did you receive something from us? Put it here. You can also do specific URLs in your mailers that are specific to packages that will input that information automatically. But if you're doing event promotions, right, you can use promotion codes that will tell people tell you what piece of mail they received when making that electronic transaction. And I mentioned before that we're not cannibalizing, we're not shifting the same dollars from offline to online generally. You know, there's studies out there that show that that more people will donate offline after having made an online gift. So they've made that transaction, certainly if they're new, they've opted in, they are on a mailing list, and they can be solicited via paper for future giving, particularly at annual fund time or end of year time. And then just one study out there, direct mail, 6 times more likely to drive an online donation than an e-communication. I think Ben mentioned this. Email, it's going to solve everything, right? It's going to reduce our costs of donor acquisition and fundraising to 0. No, it's still very important to get a paper message out there. Something, again, physical, you're hitting people on multiple channels to get them to act on. I mentioned before I run a radio station fundraiser, and in that space it's very well known that you've got to get 6 or 7 touch points on somebody before they'll pick up the phone. So think about that in the multiple channels that we use to reach people today between physical and electronic communication. So, dovetailing again from Luke and Anne-Marie's presentation, all that investment that you've made in your branding, in your content, in waking up every morning and blogging, in tweeting 7 times a day, can be wasted if you've got a poor experience in capturing that transaction. And then there are a lot of things you can do that are learnings from the e-commerce space that won't cost you anything that you can apply to at least raise your likelihood of success. Trust your eyes. Everyone here buys stuff online, I presume. Does anyone here not buy anything online? That's an embarrassing question. I love this quote. Augie Napoli at CMA, Cleveland Museum of Art, says, "Why should it be easier to buy a pair of shoes online?" than it is to make a donation to a world-class organization. Okay, you guys are judges. If you have an exciting, interesting, seamless, streamlined experience buying something on the web, bring it home. Why can't you do this stuff yourself? There's no reason. You can do it. And you'll be responding to your donors' needs better because most of us in this room are donors to the organizations that we support as well. And that last point, you know, when we started this company, we talked about relationship-based online. And people scratched their head and said, you can't really build a relationship. And we haven't got the right word on it yet. But if you communicate with people consistently, if you talk about, no matter how you're reaching them, and when you bring them from one channel to another, if your message is consistent, if you remember something about them from transition to transition or time to time, aren't you building a relationship? Aren't you reflecting that there is a real person out there and you are really communicating with them? You can do that online, and I challenge everyone here to do that and make your online experiences better for your donors.